Valheim, Day 1 by Alice Elizabeth. Read by Steve Parker. Bjorn woke up to the darkness that existed just before dawn arrived. He was lying on hard stone and sat up to see that he was surrounded by towering rocks.
"Oh, what in Helheim did I do last night?"
he croaked.
"And why does my mouth taste like the bottom of a pigsty?"
A raven cawed, and Bjorn thought that he also heard the words, "Hail Warrior." He spun around and saw a black bird staring at him with an unsettling and uncanny intelligence. Moments passed as Bjorn looked into the void of the raven's eyes before it screeched and flew away, leaving Bjorn with knowledge that he didn't possess before. Bjorn didn't know where he was, and he wasn't even sure about who he was, but he now knew that these stone monoliths surrounding him were the key to his salvation. He walked around the circle of monoliths, inspecting them, looking for signs or symbols, anything that might give him an indication of how to proceed. Deeply embedded in the ground, still half buried, he found a smaller rock. It had been deeply carved with patterns that glowed a menacing red.
"Oh, yeah, red glowing runes. That doesn't send shivers down my spine at all. I'm sure it's a perfectly fine and normal stone. Nothing to worry about at all."
Bjorn tensed as he reached out to touch the stone, not knowing what would happen when he laid his hand upon it. An image burned into his mind. An altar in a clearing in the woods, not far from here. He didn't know how he knew this, but he did. He just had to go east, and he'd find it.
Eikthyr.
The name escaped his lips, and his purpose was made clear. Bjorn knew why he was here. He must find and defeat this elder god. He stood up and took stock of his surroundings properly for the first time since waking. The standing stones were in the center of a large meadow. There were woods in the distance, and he could hear the burble of a stream not too far away.
"Yeah, shelter first. No, food,"
he said.
"No, a weapon."
Then he looked down.
"Yeah, or maybe pants first."
Thoughts of Eikthyr consumed Bjorn as he headed off towards the woods. What was this god? How could he defeat him, he wondered. It was cooler under the shade of the trees, and Bjorn was momentarily blinded as his eyes adjusted to the darkness. He heard a barking sound. He dropped into a crouch, trying to make himself as small a target as possible for whatever beast was out there. His heart was pounding, expecting any moment to feel cold teeth in the back of his neck or razor-sharp claws slash his side open. He turned slowly, silently, trying to find the source of the sound, when a deer bounded past him, nearly knocking him over and letting out a barking "Hurr!" as it passed.
"Are you kidding me?"
Bjorn said.
"A deer? I'm not scared of a dumb herbivore."
And he started to chase it down. He followed it through the trees, trying to keep up as it constantly darted and changed direction. When it eventually stopped, Bjorn was exhausted.
"I'm going to kill you. Then I'm going to eat you. Then I'm going to make a nice new pair of pants from your skin."
He crept as quietly as he could towards the deer. It was right there. All he had to do was reach out and... The deer was off again. Bjorn let out a cry of frustration and slumped down against a tree. He'd spent a good part of the day chasing a deer through the woods with nothing to show for it. He was hungry and tired, and he didn't have anywhere to sleep yet, and he was still completely naked.
"Couldn't you lend a guy a hand, Odin?"
he shouted to the skies.
"I wake up in the middle of nowhere with nothing, and you want me to kill an elder god? You could have at least set me up with a pair of pants."
After having his tantrum, Bjorn picked himself up and returned to the task at hand. Food, shelter, and clothing. As he crested a rise, he saw something in the trees that looked like a hut.
"What is that?"
he said to himself, and picked up his pace to see what it was. Bjorn was so focused on reaching the building that he didn't notice what was coming up behind him until it was too late, and it smashed into him. "Pig!" Bjorn shouted. Not just because it's incredibly rude to knock someone over from behind like that, but because that's what it was. The boar turned and wheeled around for another charge. Bjorn braced himself this time and waited for its attack. He let out a grunt to match the boar's and threw his hardest punch at it. The boar was staggered and looked surprised that anyone would be crazy enough to try and punch a wild animal. It backed up again and came in for another go.
"Stupid animal! You chose the wrong Viking to take on today!"
Bjorn yelled as he rained punches down on the unsuspecting beast. It was slow and it took everything he had, but eventually the boar went down, pummeled to death by a naked Viking. A noble death for a noble beast. Bjorn sat next to its body, exhausted but victorious. His hands were bloodied and they hurt to high Asgard, but he elated from the thrill of the fight, and he raised his fists in the air and screamed his thanks to Odin. "Odin!" Night fell as Bjorn cooked chunks of boar meat over a hastily built fire in front of a fallen-down hut. He'd patched up the roof and walls as best he could with pieces of wood he'd found nearby.
"I wonder who lived here before,"
Bjorn wondered aloud.
"I don't think they've been here for a long time. Their roof has all fallen in and walls have turned green."
Bjorn lay down in his makeshift bed, starting to get sleepy after his first day in this world.
"Does that mean there are other people nearby, or am I the only one? Perhaps they are looking for Eikthyr too. Perhaps they were killed by Eikthyr and that's why they didn't come back. Maybe tomorrow I'll find more people. I'll sleep for now. And tomorrow, hunting."
Bjorn dreamed of once again running at the head of his warriors, the weight of his father's axe in his hand. He woke with a war cry on his lips.